This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and constructionbusinessaccelerator.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help construction business owners maximize revenue and eliminate chaos. I've got a great interview with Neil Sundresh today. He's a good friend of mine and a coaching client. He owns Glacier West Construction, who has offices in Vancouver and Edmonton. And here's what you're going to get out of this interview. You're going to get some of Neil's key learnings from buying a construction business. You're going to learn about the surprising importance of goodwill in that process. You'll also hear about how Neil involved his clients in the transition. Neil also discusses some of his most educational mistakes, which is one of my favorite questions to ask people. He'll also explain what he would do differently if he could go back and do it all over again. You'll also learn about how Neil uses transparency in business with his employees, with his clients, and it's a little counterintuitive, but it's very successful, fascinating stuff. So Neil's a fascinating guy, brilliant guy, very successful, and I'm very grateful that he agreed to be on the podcast. I'm also very grateful to have the opportunity to have worked with him in my one-on-one coaching program for the last 6 months or so. And he'll also share about his experience in the coaching program. So before we get into that interview, I do have a couple of resources I want to make available to you. If you own a construction business and you need some help establishing the vision and the direction of your company, where are you headed? If you need some help mapping out your plan to get there, if you just need accountability to keep yourself moving, to maintain momentum and focus and keep things moving forward, then I have a one-on-one coaching program where I work with construction business owners just like you. And Neil's going to talk about his experience with that. If you'd like to talk about how that could help you establish the vision and direction of your company, help you get there, maintain accountability and focus, and then also upgrade your mindset to get where you want to be, then the first step is to schedule your complimentary call with me. You can do that at constructionleadingedge.com/call. That's constructionleadingedge.com/CALL. The other thing I want to get in your hands is a one-pager of the 9 mistakes that are probably killing your sales. There are 9 big mistakes that I have gleaned from my conversations and with contractors, my coaching clients, live events, speaking opportunities. I've put together 9 of the biggest mistakes that contractors are making that you could be making. So I encourage you to go to constructionleadingedge.com/sell, SELL. You can download that one-pager with the 9 mistakes that are killing your sales. You'll find out how fear is playing into the equation, how it is causing you to shoot yourself in the foot. You'll be surprised at how many of your problems can be traced back to fear. You'll also find out how you could be unintentionally boxing yourself in and forcing yourself to compete on price, plus several other things. Several people have told me this has been extremely helpful to them. So go get your one-pager with the 9 mistakes that could be killing your sales over at constructionleadingedge.com/sell, SELL. One final thing before we get to the interview with Neil. If you would like to have me come speak to your company or your organization, I have some spots available for speaking opportunities and speaking engagements. I'll be in Colorado in April. I'll be in Rhode Island in March, for example. And I'd love to talk to your organization and help you however I can. If you would like to talk to me about having me speak to your group, you can go to constructionleadingedge.com/contact, or just go to the homepage, hit the contact button, or you can just send me an email, todd@constructionleadingedge.com, and I'll help out however I can. So now, without further ado, let's get to the interview with my good friend, Neil Sundresh of Glacier West Construction. All right, Neil, I've been looking forward to this. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Todd, for having me.
Okay, here's where I'd like to start. Can you share some of the key learnings that you've gleaned from going through the process of acquiring a construction business?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Todd, for having me on this podcast. You know, I've been listening to it for the better part of a year, and I've learned a lot from it. So I'm really happy and honored to have this opportunity to give back a little bit to anybody else who's out there. So I think my perspective will be very specific to the acquisition of either a construction or an engineering architectural firm. what you're acquiring when you buy a firm like this, in my opinion, for the most part, or an element of, is goodwill. And defining goodwill it can be tough, and that definition changes. But in my opinion, the definition of goodwill is relationship with clients and relationships with staff, resources, and any number of vendors, whether they're sub-trades, consultants, professional experts that form part of your network. Now, in our case, I had been working for, almost 10 years with my predecessor. And what I noticed is probably in the 3 years leading up to the sale, where we actually inked something, I had become the lead, and I had been given that opportunity to take those networks that existed and make them my own. So in some ways, I would even say that the sale didn't even need to happen. I know it seems a bit odd to say that, but it's how do you transfer goodwill? Now, accountants and lawyers are going to tell you that you affix a value to goodwill, and then you pay off a certain amount of it over a period of time until you've paid off the goodwill. Now, I would argue that you've got to take it a step further than that. Being able to work together, whether it's before the sale or during the term of the sale, is important. What it does is it enables you as a purchaser to understand how and why the predecessor had those relationships and what the rules were that allowed those relationships to exist. Before we, announce the transition, I would say that for the most part, we met with clients, whether it was lunch, dinner, even meetings at their office, our office. We explained what was happening, what the changes would be. And we kept them updated on things that were happening during the transition. We were quite open book about it. And in many cases, I think that a lot of the clients that had worked with my predecessor, some going on 40 years, were so bought in to the idea of this change and shifting of the guard that they were urging us to make the transition. I had clients coming to me saying, Neil, we're happy that you guys have put this in place, that you're making this change. How can we help you? And for me, that was a big success, I think, in terms of this transition is establishing the buy-in of clients, and that can happen at any time. It can happen before the sale, during the sale, or after the sale.
Yeah, and that seems a little counterintuitive to some people to be so open about the transaction. I think a lot of people would want to pass around non-disclosure agreements, try to keep everything under wraps, and then when it's too late to screw the deal up, quote, well, allegedly, or whatever they're thinking would screw the deal up, that's when they would roll it out to employees and talk to clients about it. But you involved the people who are normally kept, who this transaction would normally be kept from. What were some of the advantages to doing that rather than keeping it under wraps?
I think that, if I look back at it now, I think what it did is whether it was our staff base or our vendors or clients, in telling them what was happening, advising them of what was happening, how it was going to happen, what was going to change and what was going to stay the same, and allowing them to dialogue with us about what they thought about the change, we forced their hand into buying into what we were doing. Transparencies can be hard to come by at times, and in construction, when you're building projects for people from start to finish, you're going to have problems. You're going to run into problems. That's the nature of those projects. Projects? One of the two.
Yeah, that's okay. I speak Canadian. I can say project. If you try to sound like an American, you can say project.
Projects.
There you go.
All right. Yeah, I don't know who's saying it right. Okay, I'll say projects. Yeah. So, yeah. So, and at any point when you have an issue, I feel like, delivering bad news, being open book about it, coming forward with solutions is how you get through those hurdles. And this was no different, right? We're effectively changing the way we do business with people and bringing them the news early, advising them of how what solutions we'll have in place for them before and after. And, like I say, getting that buy-in, that cemented relationships. And to the point, and here's a marker of it, is that our first year after the transition was our biggest year for either my predecessor or the current company.
As you look back on this process, what was one thing that surprised you about the process, or that you were not expecting, whether good or bad?
Well, yeah, I think what surprised me the most was how quickly the change was able to happen. There's a lot of moving parts that go into doing something like we did, and changing names, changing, whether it's changing your infrastructure, your templates, your contracts, and all that stuff. That was all, in my mind, it was all secondary. Once we had everybody bought into the concept, all that stuff was just paperwork, and it happened so quickly. Like, I don't actually remember one time having to go back and forth with anybody about an existing construction contract or, changing what the implications were. It was honestly just passing emails back and forth and getting things signed. And the same would go for employment contracts and any, subcontracts we had in place. I think people were so aware of what was happening, and they understood the implications to themselves, that it made changing old contracts from the old entity to the new entity dead simple.
Got it. So let's talk to two different groups of people who will be on different sides of the table, different sides of a potential acquisition. Let's say you're speaking to someone who has owned a business for a certain amount of time, and they're ready to make either have an exit strategy, put a succession plan in place, and they're just getting started. They don't have a Neil on their staff. They haven't really even started the process. What are the first few things that they should really be thinking about as they start to put together a plan like this?
I would say that aligning yourself with a junior, a mentee, because you're going to have to succeed this to somebody. And the earlier you can get somebody on board, you should be training your replacement, I think. And in our case, that was a 6-year period where I was really being trained to do what I'm doing now by my predecessor. And, I brought some other things to the table, but I think ultimately, if I put myself in his shoes, I think he saw in me qualities, not technically related, not construction or engineering related, qualities of, moral related, like honesty, professionalism, respect, compassion. And we share some of those traits, and fundamentally having that kind of commonality between the two of us, that, we know how we operate. Yes, I'm going to deal with things differently than he may have, but as long as there was this understanding of respect, I guess respect's the right word. You can train people to do what you do for you. And that I think that will make your succession plan easier, right? Because if you're just going to decide in the 11th hour, look, I need to get out of this thing, I'm going to sell to third party, that you don't know who they are, you don't know what they bring to the table, you don't know what they're going to do to your vision. And I, as a business owner now myself, but also having watched my predecessor and others, there's a bit of your own personal ego that gets tied to what you're doing. and you build these client relationships, you build a legacy. It's very hard to pick up and say, you know what, I'm gonna turn off the light switch and go out the door. You do want to leave it to somebody or something that can carry parts of your vision forward.
Yeah, good advice. Now let's go to the other side of the transaction. If you were speaking to someone who, well, let me back up. One of the best pieces of advice that I didn't take was from one of my first bosses, maybe my first boss. He owned a construction company and an engineering company. His name was Martin. And he said, Todd, don't ever start your own business. Go find somebody who has an existing business. Maybe they want to retire soon and then work out some sort of transition plan to take it over from them. That was such great advice that I went right out a few years later and started my own business and completely ignored that advice, realized the error of my ways. So for the people listening who are thinking, man, I would love to get into a position. I would love to be smarter than Todd DeWalt and actually take Martin's advice and do that instead of getting punched in the face financially and emotionally speaking by making all the mistakes that Todd did. What advice would you give to them? Where should they start? What should they be thinking about? Where would you go with that?
So I think now, more than ever, there's a lot of opportunity for individuals in their late 20s, early 30s to align themselves with firms where leadership is on their way out. And if I was to enter the workforce today, that's what I would be looking for is the same kind of circumstance where you can find somebody that or some organization where you can work for 5, 10, 15 years and work yourself into a managerial position if that's your intention, to own a firm through transition. And eventually sort of take on that and create your own business, because it does two things. For one, I've seen it go the other way where, firms have a really great reputation, great book of business, great client trade network, and they don't have any kind of succession plan. They're not grooming that next person. And all of a sudden something happens, somebody passes away, or there's an accident, or they decide, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. It's too taxing on me. I'm almost 70. And they've got to flick the light switch. And that's such a shame to me, because they've created massive potential over the course of their career. If somebody can ingrain themselves into the managerial culture of a company, rather, they can take that, leverage it. They can bring strengths that they have to the table. They can get rid of a few systems and maybe some relationships that aren't great, and sort of jump off to the next level. I didn't come from a family necessarily where there was a pre-existing business for me to take over, but I did the next best thing. I worked hard to become a part of my predecessor's family in a way, so I could be the next generation for him. And so there's two things that I would urge people to do, sort of looking to get into a relationship like that. And the first is to not be closed-minded. Business is not what you learn in school. Not what you do early on in your career. It's very, very different. Being an entrepreneur requires you to always find a solution, to always find a way. And when you get into that position where you can work with somebody to, kind of get into their business, to get into their management, you're effectively going to learn how they think and how they solve problems. So I would urge people to be, again, not be closed-minded, to learn to solve problems the way other people solve problems and not necessarily the way you think you should solve problems. I don't know. Does that make sense, Todd, what I just said?
Yeah, definitely. When I think about well, one of the mistakes I made early in my career was I was not a fan of what I'll call the process. I was always looking for the next promotion, always looking for shortcuts, trying to get to the next thing, whatever the next thing was, as quickly as possible. And I found that to be problematic because, in my opinion, the process prepares you for what you're going to handle on the other side of the process.
Right.
So, and it also allows you to pick up tools and learn principles along the way. What are the top one or two tools, or we'll just call them tools, that you would advise someone to pick up along the way if they want to be a construction business owner?
Yeah. Okay. That's a really good question. I would say that one thing that has helped me tremendously, again, not always having the answer, not always being in a position to come up with a solution, is I think that there's a lot of unsolicited but very helpful, powerful advice that exists in the industry. For the most part, I've always found that people love talking about themselves. I know I love talking about myself. I know you definitely love talking about yourself, Todd. So I did this, and I hope nobody gets upset at me, but I cozied up to a lot of people that own construction companies or engineering companies or were seniors and leads on projects. And I would just ask them, how would you handle this situation? What would you do in this circumstance? And those, those nuggets of information that I got, throughout my time, either managing or running a construction company, those were the most insightful things that I still have in my toolbox. I mean, I have a constant, I've got my degree and I can turn back to my education, but I would say that the unsolicited practical advice that you get, and in my case, mostly from other business owners, was the greatest source of information for solving problems at an executive level.
So being open-minded is key. And then I'll ask it a different way. Technical skills or soft skills, which are most important? If you had to pick one, if you're advising somebody who's going to be in a position running or owning a construction company in 5 years, and they had to pick one to focus on, what would it be? Soft skills or technical skills?
Soft. I'd say soft, yeah. And the reason I say that is no one on this planet is ever going to possess all of the technical knowledge that exists. That knowledge base is changing. It's infinite, right? The thing with soft skills are that you can use those things at times of trouble, of change, of problem to get from the start to the finish of a problem-solving cycle. I mean, the actual solution to a problem is it's always, I'm not going to say simple is not the right word, but it's tangible. It's, install a different kind of door. It's repaint the wall. It's any number of things that's going to solve a problem. But how you get buy-in from both the people that need to make that change, from the people that are part of your team, and you implement those things, that's entirely how you deal with people, and not so much what the work is.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Especially as you get into larger, more complex projects and project teams, your ability to communicate and get buy-in on the front end is so powerful. And unfortunately, in my experience, it's really lacking in a lot of people who are project managers, superintendents. So great advice there, folks. If you want to develop some superpowers Take it from Neil. Work on your soft skills. So let's talk about your business. Let's back up and talk about your business, Neil. What kind of work do you do? Where are you at? Give us some idea of the industry you're in, size of your company, that kind of stuff, so people can get a feel for what you're up to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we operate primarily in the light industrial commercial sector. We do work primarily in the food industry, but we service other parts of the light industrial sector. We've been doing some interesting projects, liquid natural gas, compressed natural gas facility conversions, heavy duty auto maintenance shops, office and warehouse complexes for, big earth moving companies, a lot of cold storage, a lot of freezer buildings, just really anything in that realm is our wheelhouse. I'd say we're like a medium-sized firm. We operate from, and I don't know if you guys down there across the line would know your Canadian geography, but we operate anywhere from British Columbia all the way to Manitoba, and we'll even go outside that range for clients. I'd say that we're a very client-centric firm. So, if I would say that for half of our book of business, we would be working in different geographical, in different areas, different cities, different provinces. We have an extremely interesting workforce, I'd say, without exception. Every person that works in our firm would be doing more than their job title. So, if you're a construction manager, then there's certain days where they're likely doing site supervision work or, estimating or getting involved with HR issues. We're pretty dynamic in that perspective because, well, just people are not all the same. And so we encourage, anybody that's working at our firm to go outside the norm of what they're supposed to be doing and, take some initiative. Do you want to get involved in something else in the firm? And we always embrace that. We encourage it. And we found that that's been a good thing for our business model.
So let's talk about client relationships a bit. You had mentioned that during the acquisition process, you were really transparent, maybe radically transparent, some people would think, with your clients about that process. And we've been working together for several months, and we've had a lot of conversations about transparency and your approach to building relationships with your clients. And you've got some pretty powerful, I don't know what to call them. They're really values, I guess, or principles that you operate from. I'm not going to call them strategies or tactics because that's not what they are. They're just, you're expressing your values in the way that you deal with your clients. But when you think about developing relationships with clients, what are some of the things that you do or the ways that you operate that may be a little different than the typical contractor? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the question makes sense. I was much like a lot of people that are in the construction industry. I used to despise selling. I used to despise the sales side of business. I thought I was terrible at it. And I'm probably not great at it, to be honest. But I think the thing that, at least that I've personally adopted over time, and it could just be my personality, Todd, not so much something that I'm trying to do deliberately. It's look, we're working in a sector where you get to be side by side, typically, with the owners of some really sophisticated, large organizations. And by, like I said, they're willing to share a lot of information with you. That most of my clients are, some are giving me advice on how to run my business. So here's probably some things that I would say that maybe we do differently that, some people might disagree with me, which is fine too. But I would debate that when you have an opportunity to ingrain yourself in the culture of your clients, whether it's by getting involved in their business, getting involved in a personal matter, I see those as huge opportunities to cement relationships. I'll give you a couple examples, Todd. So in construction and engineering, I find that, we're really good at taking minutes, right? We take minutes at every meeting and we circulate those minutes because we're keeping a record of what we do and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't actually exist in a lot of sectors outside of construction and architecture and engineering. I had a client once who brought me in, and I did this all, pro bono, just because I just thought it would be an interesting opportunity. He brought us in to help him run his annual meeting. And I sat there and I took minutes from it for him. I shared the meeting with him while he ran it. And, that was cool because we sat there and we helped these people establish the vision for their business for the next year. We have no business doing this. It is of no benefit to us from a construction or even a business development perspective. I did it simply because I wanted to help this guy out because he's a client of ours. If you're in this game and you actually care about your clients, then at least I feel like you might end up going the extra mile once in a while, and that's maybe going the extra mile in a different way, I'd say. And I think it pays dividends to do stuff like that. Anytime I get a call from any of our clients, and we don't do a lot of residential work in our business, but if they call me and say, look, Neil, we're having this problem at our house. We need to... Did I say house funny? Did I say house like a Canadian guy?
No, it sounded very American.
There we go. Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
It sounded like a Southerner, but Northwestern American.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, if I get a call from somebody, look, I'm having this problem at my house. Anybody who's had a problem at their house knows that those are very personal issues, and they're very emotional because usually you've got a partner who's standing there saying, how are we going to fix this? And so in those cases, I almost always, without exception, jump in to help out, whether it's bringing the right consultants to the table, bringing the right trades to the table, just getting a price for the guy, giving him the quote. He can pay it directly. I wash my hands of it. But I offer our time, and I'd say the time of our staff and any resources within reason to help people get out of binds when they have issues at their homes. And I think that's really powerful because what you're doing is, you're bringing some expertise to somebody who needs your help, which if you can give, man, give wholeheartedly. But secondly, you're showing this person that you care about them and you care about what they're going through. And if you can at any level truly care about somebody that you're working with, then you're cementing a relationship, and that pays dividends towards your business.
One of the things that we're really bad about, effective but bad about in the construction industry, is creating walls, creating silos between us and the contractor, between general contractor and subcontractor, between labor and management, between field and office. And what I'm hearing you say is these walls, one, don't need to be there. We don't need to have silos. We don't need to put our clients in a box and ask questions like, well, how are we going to get paid for that? And we don't have a contract for that. And it's similar thread to the conversation about the transparency during the acquisition. So when you think about your clients, well, how should people think about their clients? Should there be some sort of separation? Is there a line where one is going too far with transparency with their clients? Maybe that's the way to ask it. How far can somebody go with this transparency approach? Is there a line that shouldn't be crossed with transparency?
I don't think there's a line. Fundamentally, sorry, go ahead, Todd.
No, I guess what I'm hearing you say is you're treating your clients, and maybe this extends off based on conversations we've had in the past. I know you treat your employees much differently than some people treat their employees. There are no walls there, but you're just treating people like friends. You're developing relationships with your clients and helping them whenever they have a problem. And based on what we've talked about, you're not giving with strings attached, but it does pay off in the end. It's giving with no strings attached is a good business development strategy. Would you agree with that statement?
I would 100% agree with that statement. And it's not just clients. I mean, right now, labor's in certain markets that I work in, getting labor is it's one of the hardest parts of our business. And, looking at it from, another angle, looking at it from management and staff relationship, there tends to be a lot of boundaries at times about what we can talk about personally between one another. And I'd say that we at our organization try to push that boundary a little bit. For the most part, I tend to know how personal relationships of people that are in my team are going. I tend to know if there are critical issues at their house or at their home. And they would know that about me. They would know if I'm off having when we were off having our daughter, my staff base knew about that. They knew what I was going through, and vice versa. When I know that they're having, either a great time at home, a great experience, or they're having a tough time with something, they'd share that with me. And I think the reason is the way you work and how you work. It's an extension of yourself, and your family is an extension of yourself, and there is crossover there. And quite often, I mean, we're all human. If you walk into somebody's office and sit down and talk to them about a project or whatever it may be, if something's not going great with them, you can see it on their face. I'm quite deliberate about not ignoring that. If I can see it, if I can hear it, if I know somebody's going through trouble, and whether it's a client or staff, I don't change the rules. I ask, how's it going, man? Are you okay? Everything cool? When people can get that kind of stress off their heart, their chest, and I think it does two things. It cements a relationship, and second, it enables them to do their job better. So I think we should be encouraging more of that at various levels in your organization.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. I think you've even done that to me on a call or two. Ask me, hey, are you okay?
Yeah. No, I remember a call where I think we ended up talking about you a little bit more than me.
Probably so.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you this question. This is one of my favorite questions to ask business owners, especially. What is one of your most educational mistakes that you've made in business?
I'm trying to not give you boilerplate answers. I'm trying to really give you unique insight here, Todd.
Hey, give me the good stuff. Dig deep. I'm gonna read. Everything has been great so far, so you've set the bar pretty high. If you give me some cheap answer, I'm going to call bullshit.
I know you will. That's okay. So, what is that? Okay, I think I know what it is. If I look at myself in the last, let's say, 5 years of professional existence, let's call it, and the 5 years prior, I'd say that the biggest change is, or the biggest mistake that I was making on a consistent basis was assuming that I had to know everything. It goes back to if you're a project manager, then you're the guy. You've got to be able to manage your project. You've got to have the solution. And I think I'm going to cater this more towards what my skill set is. There's stuff that I am really good at. There's stuff that I excel at. I think I could be one of the best at. But there's a lot of stuff that I really suck at, and I'm terrible at it. And instead of trying to do all of those things, now I think the biggest change in me is the stuff that I'm good at, I do. And I bring others and I train them to do it so they can learn how to be good at those things also. And the stuff that I'm not great at, I pass to others who are great at it. And I build networks and teams around them too, so they can have the support. And, I'm going to steal your line, a rising tide raises all ships. If you can change that in yourself and only work to your strengths and work to the strengths of others, as opposed to trying to do it all yourself because you think you need to be good at everything, I think you'll see a significant increase in everything, be it performance, the results of your business. I think that was a big one for me.
Why don't we delegate? Why are people, maybe a more specific question is, why were you reluctant to delegate? Why did you feel like you needed to do everything? Maybe you thought you were the only guy who could do something, or you thought you were the best at it. What did you realize was actually going on there that needed to be undone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something I'm still working through and I'm learning to handle, right? And I'd say that over the last, whatever it is, 5 or 6 months, Todd, I can't remember anymore, that we've been working together. That's been one of the biggest lessons I've learned from you is how to delegate, why to delegate, and setting up boundaries within like my own organization so that when I do delegate to somebody, I'm not standing there micromanaging them. So to answer your question, more succinctly, I'll say that I think it's a bit cultural from what I've seen. If a client calls me and says, Neil, I've got this problem, we've got this problem, what are we going to do? My previous tendency would have been to pick up the phone and start handling that problem directly. So I'd bypass the people that worked with me on the team, and I would go straight to vendors, suppliers, consultants, and start working on the solution. And that was good because I had solved the problem. I was getting stronger myself. But in a way, I was handicapping others. I wasn't giving others the opportunity to go and deal with those problems themselves. And I think it was a fear because I fundamentally thought, well, if the client's calling me, he's expecting that I need to deal with this issue. And that's changed in me. Now, when clients call me, I don't pick up the phone and start dealing with their problem. I pick up the phone and I call the person that is in charge of the project and say, look, client's called, we've got these issues. This is what's important to them. We need to go talk to this person, that person, find a solution. Can you start handling this? Where my first call used to be to solve the problem, now my first call is to the person that's going to help me solve that problem. And as they're going through the iterative process of solving a problem, I support them. I give them my experience. Sometimes they have more experience than me. Quite often than not, they don't. And I just help them. And I've seen in the last 6 months, there have been no bigger victories for me than to see others, people that I've worked with for 10 years, be given a problem firsthand and take it full circle and solve it. Nothing gets me happier than to see somebody else have those little victories,
Yeah. So what has it done for your team now that you are delegating things more to them? Have you seen any tangible differences, either in, could be how quickly problems are getting solved, how engaged they are? What have you seen from your team since you've been delegating differently, yay, even more effectively?
Yeah, I'd say that the change is that we've created more autonomy in our company culture, where people are working to solve problems always on their projects, but they're not necessarily running back to either myself or any other manager to get their fix. They're taking it on themselves. And I think you use the 80-20 rule when it came to delegation, right? That delegating 80% is fair, but 20% of the things you still have to be involved in. I'm absolutely still involved in a lot of the critical issues that hover around my company. But I think people have become more autonomous. They've got more confidence. They've got more trust. They're not running to me as much. So now I'm not fielding as many questions. I'm hearing a lot less from clients, I would say, than I was a year ago, because quite often they'll go directly to these local reps, whoever they are, and those people empower themselves to find a solution. And so overall, I think we've created some depth at other levels, just beyond me, and it's actually forcing us now to have to grow more, because now those people are moving out of the roles that they were in previously. They're into more senior roles, different roles, management roles. So we're able to add more people and train more people. It's almost like a little pyramid just kind of forms on its own, because people are now more autonomous. They're acting more like leaders. And so I think it just gives you more depth, if that is a good answer.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I'm a huge fan of autonomy, and I've actually found research that has said one of the number one motivators of people, it's not money, not even recognition, but autonomy is one of the top motivators of people. We are so much more motivated when we're in control of our own destiny, and we have the trust of our leaders and our clients, and we're empowered to solve problems on our own, and we have autonomy. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. It goes back to what you said, that cliche that I shared, where the rising tide raises all boats, and it's almost like it not forces, but it fosters growth in an organization, and people are ready for that growth instead of having growth forced upon you and then trying to catch up with it. Yeah. Let's see, if you ran into a business owner on the street and they said, Neil, dude, you're awesome, love the podcast, I want to come visit you sometime, but hey, I want to grow my business, what are the first couple of questions you would ask them when they tell you that they want to grow their business?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, first I would acknowledge that I am awesome.
It's just a fact. It's not bragging if it's a fact.
No,
right?
You said it, not me. I would ask why. And I know it seems odd, but I'd say, why do you want to grow your business? And the reason I would ask why is I'd like to understand what the motivators are behind wanting to grow a firm. If the answer is simply, I'm in the red every month, I want to get into the black, or I'm in the black every month and I just want to, have more profitability, then, and if that's the only answer, then I'd say that there's a fundamental problem. I think wanting to buy a business, be a part of a business, grow a business needs to be multifaceted. And I look back sort of at our own growth, whatever you want to call it, and it hasn't been driven just by that one factor. I look at, why is it that we are striving or surviving and thriving and continuing on? It has to do with a few things. Our people, for one. We have a really great family style staff base. We've got each other's backs. We're close, and we want to keep that thing in existence, and we want to see it grow to some extent, right? So that as we grow and move on out of our roles, there's other people that can do what we love to do. So that was a motivator for us. And it's different than just, I want to make more money. I want to have more clients. I want to have different clients. Yeah, that's a good motivator. I want to get into different sectors. I want to try new and interesting work. I mean, there's any number of motivators. I just think that the answer needs to be multifaceted. And if it's not, then that's where they should start, is why else do you want to grow your business? Not just to make a few more bucks, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think having an answer, a well thought out answer, is very important. And to the person who says they want to grow their business because it's not profitable now, then you're assuming that growing your business is going to help you be more profitable, and that the lack of growth is the root cause of your lack of profit.
Right.
Chances are there are a lot of other root causes. I would dig deeper into that. It's sort of like the thing that I'm talking about a lot these days is what I call the skilled workforce delusion. People say, well, we need more people in the industry, and that's going to solve our problems. Well, in my opinion, the lack of people is not the root cause of our problem. In some cases, our skilled workforce shortage is a symptom of a lot of other underlying problems, and simply throwing more people at it is not going to solve it. And in the case of a business that's not well run, that has no purpose, no plan, doesn't have good people, doesn't have good systems, has a poor leader at the top, then it's very unlikely that any amount of growth is going to solve those problems. My advice would be go find out, if you think you want to grow your business to make it more profitable, then you should really go look at some other root causes and dig into that. But yeah, I think asking the question why is great. A lot of people probably don't think that. They just think, well, if I'm not growing, I'm dying, right? And
right.
That's I had a conversation this morning with a gentleman that owns a business, and I told him, hey, if you look around and you're doing everything that, if you're doing the same thing that everybody else is, and saying the same things and sort of parroting all that same cliche advice, then you might be going the wrong direction. You really need if you're just going in that direction because everybody else is, you should probably pause and look around and really find out what you want.
Right.
One more question for you then I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about your experience. I'm a little hesitant to ask you to talk about your experience working with me, but hopefully it won't be too rough.
Yeah.
What is one topic that you believe is not being talked about enough in the construction industry? Or maybe there's multiple topics that you really feel like need to be talked about more. What are those things?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to maybe a fundamental way that we operate, and that's in, being very transparent and knowing about what's happening with the business, the lives of either our clients or, like I say, our staff base, our vendors and consultants. I think that I don't know, and I don't know, Todd, you're probably a bit older than me. You'd understand why it's been so frowned upon to know about sort of the personal lives, or to talk about what's going on in the mind of people. But I think that like mental health is something that has got a lot of stigma around it right now. And I see it, especially in construction. It's almost like if you start talking about that on a job site, it gets shut down half the time to go back to talking about grout and concrete, and I think that's something that needs more attention, work-life balance, family life, corporate culture, anxiety. I mean, we all have different levels of, we all have anxiety. We all have different levels of anxiety. I'd argue that a little bit of anxiety is probably a good thing for everybody, but there's people that for whom it's a serious affliction, man. It's like a broken leg, you know. They can't get out of bed in their own minds to go and live a functional life, and it's not something you can see, so it's hard to take on. So that would be my and that's something that I'm trying to actively be more mindful of, is to focus on the mental health and well-being of people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is very important. And yeah, our people are more than just arms and backs and legs. And we should be taking care of the entire person.
Right.
And you're right. There is, at least when I started in the industry, there's probably still some of this, but there's this notion of separation between management and labor, and separation between contractors and subcontractors, and separation between clients and contractors and vendors. And maybe it's time. Well, not maybe. I'm pretty confident it is time, but I'm certain that those silos don't need to be there. Those walls don't need to be there. And there are huge benefits, both personally and financially, to taking those walls down. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I agree. Mental health, anxiety is a big one, and it's the elephant in the room, and I think it needs to be addressed, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that we've been working together now for five or 6 months. You signed up for the Construction Business Accelerator program, and then we talked, and so you joined my one-on-one coaching program. So let's start with this question. How is life and business different now since we've been working together, if at all?
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm happy to give you your shameless plug, Doug. So I had been listening to the podcast just when I was out, on my workout, and I got a lot of value from listening to the podcasts of others. And I thought, I was in a position where, when I came to meet you and talk to you, our company was not in the red. We were not struggling. We were thriving. Business was great. But I just felt like I needed to grow as a leader. So I wanted to challenge myself personally. I love to learn stuff. I mean, I'm learning a new language right now, and I'm taking courses, and this is something that I thought would be really great for me at that leadership level. And I didn't realize the impact that working with you would actually have on me and ensuing our organization also. The first thing we did was, it was weird, but we started talking about mindset, how decisions were being made, what were guiding principles behind decisions. And I think that you very quickly taught, it probably took you 1 or 2 sessions to realize, okay, there's a few fear-based mindsets that exist in the corporation that, need to be revisited and worked on and changed to a growth mindset. And, I used to think that, hey, I'm not going to hire all these people or this person because I'm not sure where the money's going to come from to pay for that person to be on our salary. That's how I used to think. But that fear is gone. Now, if I find the right person, regardless of if I have the work today to hire them, I bring them on. I build my bench. Because I think that if I have the right person, if I have the depth in the organization, then the business will come to us. And I would say for the most part that I've seen that shift happen with existing clients and new ones, and also having built our team a little bit more. And I think the second biggest thing that you've helped me work on is effective leadership and being able to delegate better. I'd say I was a really poor delegator. and I think to some extent I'm still a poor delegator, man. I got no shame in admitting it. I'm working on it every day. It's how do you get others, give others autonomy, responsibility, and support them as opposed to just doing things yourself. And also encouraging now others to encourage others. Well, you should be a leader just like I'm trying to be a leader, and build that depth. And I think you helped me, first off, decide what kind of things were fair to delegate to others or certain things that are not. And also you helped me establish boundaries within our own organization to say, all right, now that I've given this to you to work on, to handle, it's your baby, man. Come back to us if you need to ask us questions, use us as a resource, but it's ultimately your responsibility. And again, that autonomy, that learning that skill has been a really big benefit of the one-on-one coaching program that I've had with you.
Good. I appreciate you sharing that. Obviously, there's an investment of time. There's a financial commitment to this. How would you describe, or how do you feel about the return on investment you've gotten from being in the program?
Yeah, I'm probably a bit too honest at times. I've admitted to you at times that I thought, it's a lot of money, Todd. I wonder if I can keep this going, and if I should, if it's going to yield me any results. And I don't feel that way anymore. I look at the overall investment that we've made on this one-on-one coaching seminar. And I think of it in terms of value. I don't think of it in terms of man hours. And in a way, I look at a lot of contracts that I have, in our business, more along those lines too, is, okay, what value am I bringing a client? If I'm going to go and sit at the table while you design your building, working with an architect, working with any number of consultants, but I'm sitting there bringing you my expertise. Well, now I feel like I should be paid for it. Because just like any of those other people at the table, I'm bringing serious value. I'm avoiding serious mistakes. I'm giving you insights that are going to have you or help you get into a building that are state of the art. Whether you build it or not, I think it's fair to say that and this isn't a direct answer to your question, I'm talking about myself, Todd, I'm going to bring value to those clients. And it's the same thing here with you, Todd. I feel like your value to me was very high level, and it urged me to change the way I thought about staff base, growing my business, to the point that we saw tangible results because we started changing the way we bid certain types of projects, And so I would say that the return on investment would have been fivefold within a 5 or 6 month period on what we've done together, Todd. That's
good. I'm glad to hear that. And let's talk a bit.
That doesn't mean that I'm not upping your fees, though.
So I can't charge more. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, this is a common problem that I run into. Contractors don't charge enough. This shows up in a variety of ways. When we put together an estimate, we look at the total number at the bottom and we think, they're never going to pay for that. That's too much. Or we put together our pay application or our invoice for time and materials work, and our immediate response is, it's too much. It's too expensive. And then it may even show up when we are reluctant to call about an invoice that's past due. And I think a lot of it goes back to what you talked about, is the value the lack of value that contractors associate with their effort. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, did you see that showing up in your life? And then what did it look like before, and kind of what was that process like to change your mind, and what's it like now?
In the past, I think, we work for some really stingy clients, and I would say that we ourselves are very stingy people too. It's a part of doing business. It's a part of watching the cents and the dollars look after themselves. I've heard one of my favorite clients say that to me often and often. But here's the difference though. If you're working always on the basis that, well, I put 4 hours of 4 man hours of time in, and so I'm going to bill for 4 hours of my time, and you're getting pressure on something like that, then I would say that you're probably approaching the entire project the wrong way. You're probably bringing value to this person, to this client. And my experience and what I've learned is that usually financial pressure on reviewing invoices or contracts is tied to a perceived lack of value. So now, when I look at something in a situation, and when I know I'm bringing a client a tremendous amount of value, if I'm doing more than just hiring the trades to build their buildings, if I'm able to bring them all these insights during design, if I'm able to do some design, if I'm able to consult with them prior to, during construction, and even well after construction, I'm always bringing them value. And in those cases, I find that I typically have few to no questions about invoices, about contracts, that everything, like I say, the paperwork seems to just fly through. And it's because you're doing your job, right? That's our job in construction, is to bring value to people who want to create buildings for their businesses. And if you do that, if you bring in more than just, this is where this wall should go, and this is what kind of flooring we should use, it's more of a different approach to value. You don't need to sell hours. I would argue that in certain cases, hourly work is pretty shitty. Give them a fixed price. And in certain cases, when it's a tough renovation and there's a bunch of unknowns and they want to fix you at a fixed price, tell them no. Say it doesn't make sense to go fixed price here because there's too many unknowns. You're putting yourself at risk. You're putting us at risk. And that risk, there's a cost to that risk. So I try to assess things. So the biggest change, back to your original question, the biggest change is assessing cost of construction, cost of engineering, whatever you want to call it, based on actual value that you bring.
Well put. Well put. Couldn't agree more. I think there's a fundamental problem in the construction industry that doesn't really exist in a lot of other industries, because our clients are making decisions based on value, the value to them, whether it's value to a homeowner getting a new kitchen, value to a business owner building a new distribution center. There's some value, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, and they're making decisions based on value. But we as contractors, we're pricing work based on cost, and we are anchoring ourselves to this cost and then using some somewhat arbitrary percentages to get up to our selling price. And that's not what our clients are. They're not looking at. They don't understand the cost. They're looking at value. So I couldn't say it any better than when someone is giving you price pressure, that is a symptom of low perceived value. Good stuff. So as we wrap up, one more question. What are some recommendations you have, whether it's a book that has been impactful to you, a leadership resource, something like that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you asked this, because this was on my notes to discuss. I've read a lot of books. I've done a lot of coursework. I'm a registered engineer in here up in Canada, and so I've done a lot of that kind of training and mentorship. In my opinion, the information that I've gathered that is most valuable to me in my life has been what I like to call unsolicited mentorship. And here's what I mean by unsolicited mentorship. And I know my wife will not listen to this podcast because construction talk puts her right to sleep, but I talk to my wife a lot, like probably too much. It's daily, it's frequent. Um, she's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and she works in a totally separate sector. She's in the health sector, but we talk about construction almost every day, and I gain her perspective. One of her biggest perspectives to me when I have a problem and I come home and I talk to her about something that goes on in the day, one of her biggest perspectives is, well, have you ever thought about what that person is going through? Have you ever thought about what that person is thinking? Why they're coming to you or they're coming at your organization this way? And I always find that perspective, it almost always tempers my interactions with people. Another place I think that is it's a source for really great unsolicited leadership advice. For me has been my clients. So, one client in particular, we do a lot of work for them across Canada, and I'm on a plane with them sometimes, just flying to the next job site, drinking some red wine, and like I value so much the stuff that they have told me, said to me. It's very in line with the principles that we talk about, Todd. It's about working to the strengths of people. It's about, well, how do you delegate effectively? How do you create autonomy? How do you foster transparency? These are things that clients have told me, and I'm really blessed. I've worked with one of my clients. He's turning 90 next week. One of my favorite clients, and he's got one of the biggest cold storages in Canada, and he's sort of taken me in under his wing, and he's the king of one-liners, but they're all really good one-liners. And I'll rattle a few things off he's taught me. He says, always negotiate from a place of strength, never negotiate from a place of weakness.
That's a good one.
The golden rule, according to this guy, is he who has the gold makes the rules. I really like that one. Yeah. This is another one. He always says this to me. He says to me, Neil, if you give your customers a good service, a good product, and a great price, they'll beat a path to your door every time. Anytime he wants to talk to me, and he does, he loves to spend time talking to me and advising me and hearing what's going on in my life. I shut the world out, man. And because I know that he's 90, I know that will not be there for me forever. And so just shutting up and listening, I've learned so many nuggets, or call them tools, from my own personal toolkit from my clients. So I urge people to go get unsolicited advice from people who like to talk about themselves.
Good advice. Good stuff. Well, if people want to learn more about your company and maybe even apply for a job because they're like, dude, this Neil guy, I would work for free. I would pay to be in an organization like this. Or if they just want to apply for a job, or they want to find out more about your company, where should they go? What's the best websites? Where can they reach out and find out more about your company, Neil?
I'm happy. I love talking about construction, how to exist and function in construction. I work with anybody. Really open that way. So I would, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can shoot me an email or give me a phone call directly. I can share that with you, Todd. They can get a hold of you, and we can arrange, and a sit down, a coffee, whatever. Yeah, I'm totally open for that.
Sounds good. What's your company website that they should go to if they just want to find out more about your company? And then, if you want to contact Neil, you can reach out to me. I'll have some information at the end of the podcast for a way where you can contact me, and then I'll put you in touch with Neil. But what's your company website, Neil?
Yeah, sure. It's glacierwest.ca. Glacier, GLACIER, west.ca.
Gotcha. glacierwest.ca. Great stuff, Neil. Anything else that you want to share with an audience of construction business owners and leaders?
Yeah. Absolutely. We're in the business of building, but I think we're more so in the business of people. So you can be the greatest guy at swinging a hammer, but if you don't know how to deal with people, you're going to fall short. I think that, for every person that's out there trying to create, whether it's a trade business, a contracting business, engineering, or architecture, whatever it is, shifting your mindset to understand that how you deal with people, caring for your fellow man, ingraining yourself in their culture and doing the same with your vendors, your staff, I think is going to make construction better, easier, and it'll make our kind of global workplace a more fun place a better place to exist. That's my advice.
Well said. Thanks, Neil. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and share your thoughts on business here on the podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot, Todd, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, that wraps this one up. Don't forget about those resources. If you would like to get on the phone with me and talk about how you can get better results in your business, if you want to make the next 12 months different than the last 12 months, I want to help you do that if you own a construction business. Go schedule your complimentary strategy call with me at constructionleadingedge.com/CALL, and you can join a small group of other construction business owners who are taking their business to the next level. Also, go get your one-page PDF cheat sheet with the 9 mistakes that could be killing your sales over at constructionleadingedge.com/SELL. If you want to talk to me about speaking to your group, you can send me an email, todd@constructionleadingedge.com. And hey, I always appreciate the ratings and the reviews. If you could take a minute, go to the podcast player of your choice, leave a rating and a review. That would be fantastic. If you are listening on your iPhone or iPad, you can do that. You can get some instructions on how to do that over at constructionleadingedge.com/iTunes review. That wraps this one up. As always, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate the comments, the ratings, the reviews, the feedback, and I'll see you next time.